Sir Patrick Spens is a traditional ballad. A ballad is originally written to be sung. This ballad is anonymous. Ballads usually tell tragic stories, and Sir Patrick Spens explores two primary themes. One is mortality. People are born and must die. This is related to the second theme, the role of fate or accident in people's lives. A ballad is a narrative poem. In Sir Patrick Spens, the event that is narrated is a shipwreck. Written in a traditional ballad form, the poem is composed of four line stanzas. Typically, the first and third lines of each stanza have four accents, while the second and fourth lines have three accents. Although ballads are usually unrhymed, they were originally composed to be sung. Their accents form a rhythm, and ballads have a musical quality and regular beat when read. The ballad's rhythm is reinforced by the repetition of sounds. Let's see the summary of the poem. The ballad begins by introducing the main characters. We meet the king, who is in Dunfermline, Scotland. The king sits in Dunfermline throne. The throne is a seat of his power. He also sits in the sense of being stationary. He does not move, though his actions will make others move. The wine that the king drinks is blood red, suggesting his power over life and death, as well as the ease with which he controls other people's lives. He sends men to their deaths as casually as one might drink a glass of wine. Oh, where will I get a good sailor to sail this ship of mine? The king asks. Soon the king will choose Sir Patrick Spens. Though being selected by the king is an honor, it also means that Spens must undertake an impossible journey. As a sailor, Spens is a good, skillful sailor. He is a good man, but this cannot save him from his fate. No matter how skillful a sailor he is, no human can withstand the fury of nature. And no matter how loyal and true he is, like all people, Spence must die. An elder knight speaks up. The fact that the knight is an elder suggests that he is respected, a senior advisor to the king. The knight also has power in court because he sits at the king's side, at his right knee. As we will see, because the knight speaks up, Spence and his ship are sent down 50 fathom deep. The elder knight praises Sir Patrick Spens as the world's best sailor. The king writes a broad letter of command ordering Spens to sail the royal ship. It is signed with the king's hand, the royal signature, and must be obeyed. The letter is sent to Spence as he walks along the beach. Spence reads the first line of the letter and laughs. Perhaps it praises his skill as a sailor, or perhaps it identifies his assignment, the impossible journey, and Spence laughs because he thinks it is a joke. In a sense, it is a joke played on him not by the king or the knight, but by fate. Spence reads further and realizes that the king is serious about sending him on a dangerous voyage. His fate is sealed, but his tear blinded eye is ironic. Spence asks who has done this ill deed to him, and the reader begins to suspect the motives of the elder knight. Does he have some secret motive for sending Spence to certain death? We are not told but wonder about the court, where things are not always what they seem, where illusion can be confused with reality. But the courtly world's deception does not allow it to escape from life's only certainty, death. Spen's reaction while reading the letter went from laughter to tears. So the poem's word order changes to show how his world has been turned upside down. Spence knows that the weather at this time of year is treacherous. Though the assignment is dangerous, the men must hurry. They follow Spens's orders as he follows the king's. While the men make haste, they are anything but merry. The sailors know they are sailing off to die, and while the ship may be good, no ship can withstand the violence of natural elements. In lines 23 to 28, a sailor speaks up, hoping his master will say it is not so, that they are not really going to sail. The sailor is apprehensive because he has seen the new moon in the old moon's arms, that is, the dark shape of the new moon, and only the hint of a crescent of the old moon. This is an evil omen that predicts bad weather, and the sailor fears the ship and crew will come to harm. This is the poem's most famous image. The ship has now sailed, but the nobles are loth and wet their shoes. This is ironic because soon not only their shoes, but their entire bodies will be wet and they will be drowned. The reader compares the nobles who fear wetting their shoes with Spens, who knows they are all doomed to drown in the storm. The nobles' concerns are petty in comparison with Spens, who is a brave soldier, fatalistically following orders. Though they are noble because of their family titles, Spens is noble because of his actions. The shipwreck is a play like a trick of fate or an event in the sense of sports figure who makes a play. The word play also suggests a child's game, for the sailors are like toys in the hands of nature. The fact that we see the nobles as hats and not the nobles themselves is a synecdoche, the substitution of the part for the whole. The hats themselves can be seen as a sign of worldly vanity, and it is ironic that the hats swim, but the nobles themselves cannot. They drown. The ladies stand waiting for Spens and their men to return. They stand while the king sits, and by the poem's end, the men lay. Their fans are a sign of vanity, but fans are also used to control the weather by making one more comfortable when it is too hot. At sea, however, the weather cannot be controlled and the storm kills their men. Recall that the king signs a letter with his hand, which leads to the deaths of Spens and the nobles, that the ladies wait with fans in their hands for men who will never return. This repetition of hand links cause and effect. The king who caused the men to go to sea, and the effect, the men's demise and their women's sorrowful waiting. Again, gold is a traditional symbol of worldliness, and while the gold combs will remain shiny, the women's hair will turn grey with time. Their attention to gold is misplaced, for like their men, they too will pass away. The women wait for their own dear lords, but their men belong no longer to them but to death. The women will never see their men again, though ironically, the reader sees them lying on the ocean floor. The women hope to see their men alive, but the reader sees the men's dead bodies. Half the way over to Abadur, the ship is wrecked in the storm. Now the good Spens, like the good ship, is 50 fathoms beneath the sea. The poem's ending is ironic when we consider the ways the positions of the body have indicated social status. At the end, while the lords may outrank Spens socially, their cowardice and concern for worldly things, their failure to comprehend their situation and act accordingly, sets Spens above the lords in the end. Significantly, they lie at his feet, not he at theirs. Let's see the major themes running through the poem. The first major theme that we see is power. In the 18th century, when Sir Patrick Spens was written, European society was still hierarchical. Power was concentrated at the top. This structure is reflected in Sir Patrick Spens. Most obvious is the power of the king, who holds the power of life and death. First symbolized in the blue red wine he drinks on his throne. It is more than symbolic because he does send Sir Patrick and his men to their deaths 50 fathom deep. The king exercises his power with startling ease to issue the command that will have terrible import for Sir Patrick and his crew. He has only to write bride letter and sign it with his hand. And he does with this without a single consideration of the consequences for the men and their ship. Though the command saddens Sir Patrick, he never questions the right of the king to send him on such a deadly mission. Others beside the king also exercise power. The elder knight occupies a position of power. He sat at the king's right knee, which makes him the second most powerful man at court. More significantly, though, he has the king's ear. When he recommends Sir Patrick as a good sailor, the king listens. This senior knight may even be the real power in the poem. For when Sir Patrick receives the letter sending him out to sea in winter, he suspects almost immediately that someone has an ill deed done to him. He believes some force is plotting against him on purpose, probably to kill him. Sir Patrick's authority over his men is impressive. His power seems to issue more from his moral force and personality rather than from his place in the social hierarchy. The king must sign a formal order to send the men to sea. Spens merely calls his merry men to prepare to sail, and they follow their dear master, despite unfavorable omens and deep misgivings. So Patrick's authority is emphasized in the final lines, where in Death at the Bottom of the Sea, the Scottish nobles occupy a position of subservience at the feet of Sir Patrick. The second important theme that we see in the ballad is death. As in many ballads, death is a dominant force in Sir Patrick Spens. It is a force that no human can escape. Death is personified in the figure of the king drinking blood on his throne. He is far away from Sir Patrick and his men in Dunfermline town, and until his letter comes, they can live as if he does not exist. But when death calls in the form of the king's order, it is a command that they cannot defy. First, Sir Patrick refuses to believe the fateful notice he is given. Then the tear blinded his eye, and he is overcome by sorrow. He becomes angry, crying out with a touch of paranoia that someone must be out to get him, to send me out this time of the year, to sail upon the sea. But no one can choose the time death calls, and despite the omens of doom that his men point out and their desire to avoid death, Sir Patrick and his crew must accept their fate. Some of the crew and bystanders are in denial or so wrapped up in their other things that they are completely unaware of it. The Scottish nobles sailing with Sir Patrick seem to think more about getting their fine shoes wet than they do about their own imminent deaths. Waiting for their men to return, ladies stand on the shore waiting with fans and gold combs in their hair. These glittering signs of the world's transient pleasures highlight their ignorance of the fate of their men. Indeed, the fate that awaits them sometime in the future. The images recall the famous words from the book of Ecclesiastes. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do. And behold, all was vanity and vexation. And so lang, lang may the ladies stand, waiting with their baubles and fashion, as if everything were fine, and in the end there would be a happy ending.